Dr. Moonilal after. So let me say a pleasant good evening, Mr. Martin Lum Kin, a man who is no stranger to the Observer. Pleasant good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Mikee.
Always good. Thank you. Always good to have you on. As you know, of course, it's a very hot topic now, bullying in our school system. It's nothing new. Looking at it, it's a global epidemic targeting school systems. According to one of the global specialists on it, Dr. Maharaj Sharma, said bullying as we know it today has been around since 1825, a time when perhaps a name for the behavior was not yet coined. And within the Caribbean region, school bullying has resulted in repeated eruptions of school violence and abuse. I mean, very sad. And we've seen so many of these videos that have been circulating for over the years where, of course, you see school fights and all of these issues taking place. Where are we failing our students in this entire process?
Well, let me say, Mikey, that TTUTA condemns any form of bullying in relation to the in communities and in small groups, churches, as well as in our school system. And it is a form of disruption to the students involved, both the perpetrator and the victim. And in most instances, the victim goes through quite a bit of psychological, emotional damage that can, affect them for the rest of their life. But we also have to look at the perpetrators as well, too. The perpetrators have some issues internally as well that they are going through, and they are lashing out and reaching out for attention. So the issue of bullying is something that we condemn strongly, and we have to, seek and look at what are the root causes of bullying in our society, and especially when we are looking at the school society. We cannot neglect the fact that the family plays a part as well too, and in some instances, it's a deficiency in the family, that core and that fiber of society, that is the family, because the family is the primary educator in the lives of the children. And so it transcends into the school system, and the person who is perpetrating the act of bullying, they are seeking to instill fear and a level of advantage over those who are they deem to be one that cannot defend themselves and are less timid than they are. And so, it is quite a serious issue, such that it needs the attention of all involved, Ministry of Education, and even wider society as well. Because if it is left unchecked, then it can escalate and mushroom into a bigger issue in society as well.
Yeah, I mean, basically from a perspective as parents, I mean, we do believe that, when we send our children to school, that they are going to be in a safe environment. But I did hear from one individual who made her input and said, listen, the parents themselves have to understand that it is your role to protect your child. And is this something that basically, I don't want to get too much into the psychological part of it because I know that's not your expertise, but as someone who has to deal with this issue and have to confront it based on the capacity that you function in, one has to ask the question then, when do parents really step up and say, listen, I have to protect my child? I mean, is it really and truly the responsibility of someone that I just pass it off to as a teacher, someone who may not be fully trained into this and we don't know? Is it fair then to just simply expect that whatever happens in the classroom or in the school compound is just limited to that of the individuals who are working there?
Well, one cannot get away from the fact that the parents have a role to play, and the school has a role to play as well too. And the school will oftentimes step in when there is a deficiency in the home, and there needs to be that level of intervention, and especially if the individual who is not given the type of attention would lash out to others. And the school has that role within the school environment. And by and large, education isn't only about the curriculum and books. There's the hidden curriculum. There's the need to inculcate discipline. And when we talk about discipline, it's not how we would have traditionally seen it in terms of, utilizing the rod of correction and that kind of thing. But, in terms of discipline, disciplining the child to ensure that he is focused on what is right and what is, the basic fundamental principles of society. Because persons have argued about teaching children values that are not of their value system. So we won't get into values, but getting into what is right and what is wrong. There are fundamental basic principles of what is right and what is wrong. And so the parents play a part, and the school would rely on the parents to play their part in ensuring that their child has been educated and been inculcated in a certain level of behavior that will not disrupt the school. And if it is that happens, then the school has to intervene, but there must be the requisite resources to assist the teachers, because teachers, by and large, will form a bond with their students and will recognize when there are changes in behavior, emotions, etc. I mean, we are not fully qualified to intervene, but at least, we can look at basic signs and then seek the relevant intervention in the earliest possible manner, such that it can be attended to and will be done in a timely manner as such, to ensure that it assists the child and the student.
Yeah, when you look at what's being said by the Education Minister, Dr. Nain Gatsby-Dolly, saying that the National Discipline Matrix gives clear guidance to school, students, and parents on how different infractions of bullying should be handled. And I mean, these things have been out for quite some time. I mean, it's not something that was created overnight. But explain to us this discipline matrix, because you said it emphasizes progressive discipline, including counseling and restorative practices. But noted there are situations where immediate punitive actions must be taken.
And the punitive action, the eventual action after all interventions have taken place and there's any change in behavior, is suspension. And suspension itself, by itself, does not help in rehabilitation. Suspension will just take the child out of the school and onto society and to the area where the child lives, and he or she becomes idle and can get into more mischief. In the past, there would have been places where the child, upon suspension, would be sent in order to have a level of rehabilitation as well as continuation of the teaching of the curriculum. And so, yes, within the school code of conduct, where it speaks about what is expected of the students, what is expected of the parents, what are the expectations from of the teachers, and which as the minister said, progressive discipline would ensure that there's a level of intervention and that the perpetrator. So when we're looking at bullying, you have to look at the victim and the perpetrator. Most times we focus on the victim and giving counseling, and the perpetrator a level of discipline or a level of giving them sanctions. However, there should also be a level of intervention, of counseling, and trying to restore the child to a level of what we term normal, and we can argue what is normal, but normal behavior such that they're not disruptive. And so all of these things sound nice on paper, but the level of support that the school needs needs to be improved. And that comes from the Student Support Services Division, where there are guidance counselors as well as school social workers. They are not fully resourced enough, and they are not fully staffed enough in order to have the level of intervention. And you will see, Mikey, coming post-pandemic lockdown,
Right.
you're getting a number of these instances and mental health challenges as well too. And it's placing a lot of burden on the school system, and as such, the school system needs the assistance and the resources from the Ministry of Education in order to have meaningful intervention. Now, there are other civil society groups, state agencies that can lend assistance as well too. And we always encourage our administrators and teachers to reach out to these qualified persons to assist where possible, where the student support services, the personnel cannot assist as readily or as much as they would like to utilize these persons as well.
She also highlighted an issue here where in cases where students are on the brink of expulsion, the ministry has implemented an expulsion warning letter system. And this system warns parents about their child's potential expulsion and any subsequent infraction leading to that. I have an issue with that. I'll tell you why, because it seems as though when you reach to that point, that behavior has not been something that has been shown just overnight. It has to be over a period of time. And here's where we get the issue with young people falling through the cracks. And we can't have a system that is simply producing individuals who are not going to be productive and end up, God forbid, either chalked out in a pool of blood, sitting on Raymond Yard, or sitting in some jail cell, as the case may be, or out there being a part of the criminal element. There has to be something from, seeing these red flags, having the expertise to deal with these red flags, because we go back to the fact where we are all a product of our environment. That's what we're told. We've always told. I mean, that's something that many of these psychologists would say. We are all a product of our environment. But then again, we can't blame that environment itself, for whatever happens as far as the outcome. But there has to be something in place just to say, all right, this student is a troubled student. We're seeing it over a period of time. We're getting to that period where we have to expel this student, and that's the end of it.
And unfortunately, that's our system at this time. That and one may argue from the side of the Ministry of Education and from schools that we would have attempted to reform the child as much as possible. That could be argued in terms of the number of interventions and the type of intervention. But we cannot as a society give up on our young people and our youth. Even giving up on one is one too many. That particular individual can come back and be a nuisance to society and be a nuisance to even the persons who would have attempted to intervene. And one other thing there is that, and we condemn in the strongest possible terms, teachers who have an opportunity to intervene in the lives of our students and would not have. We are not naive to say that all teachers do their jobs to the best of their abilities and are professional in their manner. We would admit that there are some in the minority, and a great minority, that do not really care about their charges. But the majority of our educators would have a great level of caring for their students. And as such, we really need the intervention of not only Ministry of Education, but society as a large, because we're going to lose a generation, or we're going to lose quite a bit of the generation if we do not intervene meaningfully and don't give up on them. We really should not give up on our
And I understand that, but when you look at the fact that they are now moved into an environment, whether at Serval or at Milat, that in itself would, of course, play on the morals of these individuals as far as feeling somewhat, look, this is where I've reached, here's where I'm at this point in time. And putting them in a different environment seems to say, well, at the end of the day, here's where you need to be. What happens in these institutions when you talk about the Serval and Milat that would be different than where they were before?
So I'm not too intimate with the Milat program. I'm understanding it's a kind of a military-based program to teach what we would deem discipline. In terms of Serval, will cater for the skills and the technical vocational areas of the child who have not been mainstream academically inclined. And so, in terms of if they do not get into the secondary school, they get to the Serval.
Yeah, and I understand that. You may not, yeah, I guess the Milat is sort of a military background and, dealing with the situation. But there has to be some balance, some balance as far as the behavior and that as well of the academics, because one affects the other as the case may be. And why are we trying to reinvent the wheel when in other countries we have seen a totally different program, not the same that we are using, that have been quite successful? Why are we not looking at these programs across the world and say, listen, we could implement some of these things here, rather than waiting for these students to actually go down a path that it seems as a path of no return and say, all right, because on one hand, you have the skills. Not everyone is going to be academically inclined. Many people will, of course, have the skills, but that in itself is not a cop-out, because things are so advanced now globally that, when you look at some of these jobs, the skills and the advancement of it goes hand in hand. So it's not like long ago when you say, well, I'm just going to be a welder, I'm just going to be a mechanic. You're talking about there's so many different items and so many different services that one could provide because so much has changed, right? But in other parts of the world, there are systems that are working. Are we still just simply confined to what we believe can work or what we believe should be working out there, rather than looking at something that has a proven track record to save our students?
And that's a very good point and a good question that you make there. When the Ministry of Education looks at policy, they should be looking, and in the past they would have looked external, and sometimes good programs they take wholeheartedly and not adapt to our context, and so it ends up failing. And so the point that you're making, looking at what is successful in other countries, sometimes depending on the situation, the culture, etc., it may not fit here in a whole way, but we can adapt it and look at trying to get to improve the behavior and the performances of our students. One of the things in the psychology of education and of the human being as well is the fact that if a person does not have the self-confidence, that belief in oneself, then it is going to affect their whole life, and it affects in terms of their association with persons. They usually reach out to persons who are seemingly stronger than they are, a stronger will and attitude, and so on, that could affect them. And so one of the things that we have to try to affect in our school lives is building the self-confidence of our young people. We are focusing greatly on the academics. We are not looking at the emotional intelligence of our students and building, their self-confidence so that it will affect them all around.
Yeah. And when you look at, of course, this component of mass social media, and that does play a part in it. I mean, things go viral so quickly. It affects individuals. I mean, if you have an isolated incident, then maybe the victim and even the person who, of course, I look at both individuals as victims here, because one simply is not born to bully. So there has to be something there that would have happened or triggered such actions. But if it's isolated as years gone by, yes, you can perhaps deal with it. But when this, of course, is spread across social media and is being played over and over again, of course, it's going to play out on the psyche of the victim and the person who's doing it. So how do we try to curb this and let young people, of course, understand how important and sometimes how dangerous social media can be?
Yes, and it is an area that I think within the school and the curriculum that needs to be addressed. And our educators throughout the levels of education, even from PCCE level, there should be a component of social media and, the effectiveness or ineffectiveness or the positive and negative influences that it plays. I know that in some schools they do it in terms of their when they have their projects and they're utilizing social media. I know our educators take the opportunity as a teaching point when it comes to social media, but more needs to be done in terms of that, and that the society how it also utilizes social media. I mean, there are a number of adults who use it in a negative way. And as we're on that point, Mikey, please permit me. We are seeing more and more out of what took place at the school in St. George's College, that our educators are being a victim of unjust abuse by members of the public who don't have an idea what actually took place. And, they are almost lynching our educators and the school, which they don't deserve. If we would want to say, let the Ministry of Education do its investigation and come with its result, and persons should allow that investigation to be completed and then make their comments. But they are making uninformed comments out there. Our teachers we visited yesterday, and none of them are expressing concerns of these threats that are out there in social media. And one dean who was directly involved, her picture was put out there, and her daughter is being a victim of bullying right now. To the effect that someone said on social media, let the teachers feel what the parent of that child is feeling now. That's an indirect threat, to their children. And St. Stephen's College has had and continues to have a reputation that is nurturing in their school environment. So as we speak about social media, sometimes we are insensitive to what is taking place, in terms of the issue. And I really hope that can change in the future.
I agree with you. I think people need to understand the effects that it has on individuals when these things are being played out over and over again. And we do have a responsibility. But, somehow people always seem to gravitate to the worst of what many of these issues has to offer, rather than trying to see how best we can understand and go back to that fundamental understanding that it takes the village to raise a child. And I know we've forgotten all about it, and it's sad. And you see, and that's why today we have individuals who are adults who would have had some long-term effect from this entire issue of bullying, as far as depression, as far as low self-esteem that you mentioned before, and so many of these mood disorders. And of course, they are more likely to drop out of school, and even those who would go out there and perpetrate these acts, they themselves find themselves not understanding or getting that social balance, and it's really bad. And I think this is something that needs to be dealt with, nip in the bud immediately, as best as we can. I know we can't eradicate it all out, but yet still something serious needs to be done, and we need to look across the globe and see what is working and have many of those programs implemented. It's time to start thinking outside the box. And I mean, when you look at the fact that what these students are to our future here in this country, I think this is something that we really and truly should not just be, brushing it off or acting as though it's normal. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And it takes a whole society effort. It shouldn't be left on the shoulders of one particular agency or one particular organization. This will affect the entire society, and as such,
and you're right.
A whole society effort.
Yeah.
And intervention.
And everyone seems to want to pass off their responsibility, whether parents to teachers and teachers to, the ministry and the ministry, and this can't happen. We simply cannot use this as some, social football that just because someone doesn't want to stand up and say, look, we are all have a part to play in this. It's all a responsibility. Sending your children to school does not, means that your responsibility is anything smaller than what the teachers have to do, the ministry has to do, the minister has to do. It has a connection, and we need to understand that.
Yeah. And I'm also referring to, we can learn from the lessons of the metropolitan cities, United States. God forbid, I'm saying this, God forbid, and I am hoping that this does not happen. But we've seen what happens in the United States when some of these children go through some of their psychological and emotional damage, and they go into schools with handheld guns, and so I'm praying that it doesn't happen here, because guns are more accessible now, and I really pray that we don't have that situation, and that we can have the intervention to prevent. Prevention is always better than cure.
I agree with you, Mr. Lum Kin, because, we always take the negative from everything. We don't take the good, we always leave the good and bring the negative here in basically everything that we do, whether it be in politics or dealing with many of our social issues. And God forbid that day does not come, because, again, it's no telling how far one individual can reach in his or her thinking. Very, very sad. Closing comments, go right ahead.
And let me first thank you for having me on the program. And TTUTA is always reaching out to the Ministry of Education to assist in any way possible to have the education system improved, and by and large, to have the society and national development improved. And so we will continue to advocate on behalf of not only our members, but of our students as well. We have a saying in TTUTA, what is good for TTUTA is good for the nation. And we will continue to promote best practices and what is best for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure. Best of luck to you and your entire team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.